Great. All right, well, we might get going. I just really want to get through our content today and our conversation. So again, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this really important conversation around, the tagline that we've used is the power of we. And for us, it's really important that we acknowledge that, of course, as individuals, it's really, really important to acknowledge what we bring and our highest potential. But the reality for us, of course, is that often huge power is harnessed when we work in the space of we with others. And we're going to cover that in detail today. And Poppy and I promise to share, I guess collectively between us, we've got, I think, about 5 decades worth of experience.
That's making us sound old.
I'm old, Poppy, you're much younger than me, but I think combined, I think we make it to the big
We're
5.
oldish. We can just be oldish.
Right. Yeah. And so, we'll bring to you our, real life experience. And of course, we're both people that spend time working with clients in this space as well. So buckle up. We look forward to the conversation. Just really quickly in terms of an agenda, as I said, Poppy Griffiths and I will be taking you through today. We're your hosts. I'm just going to talk quickly about the challenges that we're hearing about in this, teamwork realm. And we are going to talk about sort of the connection between team performance, the success factors around team performance, and this concept of what we consider the hero of our story at Maxme, and that is emotional intelligence. We'll talk quickly about, the facets of high-performing teams, and then, really stepping into this concept that a lot of organizations know about but don't really do practically, and that is sort of heighten people's self-awareness and also, this concept of team strengths in order to harness the power within the organisation. We'll do some Q&A. I've got a bit of a walkthrough of our tool that we've developed. I'd like to share that with you, and then we'll talk about some next steps. So thank you again for joining us. So,
and I think, and also too, just to add to Ren too, we were talking about whether we should go on breakouts or have group discussions. And I think Ren and I really agree that the magic of occasions like this is also made when I think we sort of hear each other's experiences and insights from the content that we bring in today. So I think we're going to remain all together and love to obviously have some discussion and interactivity. No right or wrong answers in any of this.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So really importantly, I wanted to sort of kick off with this sentiment, and that, we're hearing time and time again, pretty much from every type of organisation we work with, because we work with smaller, medium, large organisations, Poppy through her business, Maxme through our business, and the work that we do together, is that, this concept of getting to team synergy and also getting to that high performance in teams. Organizations are really, really struggling with it. And, I guess I'll start, and Poppy, you can probably pitch in as well, is some of the reasons that we're hearing is definitely ways of working. So we're definitely hearing that the hybrid work environment, which is here to stay, so that's unlikely to change, even though some organizations are trying to press for change. But, hybrid is, I believe, and I think Poppy will agree, we believe it's here to stay. But in that hybrid work environment, people are finding it difficult to find that chemistry with one another. They're seeing each other less at work. They're having less physical time with one another. Often people kick off work together, without having had spent a lot of time together, or even, recently spent time. They may never have met each other, right? Because again, in this sort of global workforce that's now opening up to companies, like kind of anyone working from anywhere, sometimes we can't physically meet in the same space. So this sort of hybrid, having to get to know one another through a kind of online means is impacting the ability to get to that team synergy, team connection, which we know for high-performing teams, building trust and rapport and moving more into that healthy conflict, commitment, accountability does take that synergy with teams. And we just, we know that these human skills, the willingness to speak up, communication skills, difficult conversations, we know that globally these skills are not where they need to be. And again, it's really impacting on a team's ability to step in and do hard work together, complex work, which is sort of where we're moving to, right? Rapid change. Humans are working on the really complex problems together. Because we're missing some of those other skills, it's really difficult to get to that high-performing, innovative, brainstorming, committed, accountable stage with one another, and then holding each other to account when things are not going well. Poppy, your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely, I really resonates what you say around just the disconnection. I think as a result of work styles and the way we're working, that hybrid model that now is definitely just the norm. That we do have to accept and navigate. I do think teams are therefore more spread out, and therefore, that makes things like trust, it makes things like, communication, and just that general cohesion harder to build. So I definitely would say hybrid and disconnected work styles, if you like. The second thing I definitely think that's causing challenge for this really great team synergy and high performance is the fact we operate in constant change and uncertainty. I think most people would agree, no matter what organisation you work in, there are constant shifting priorities, can feel like spaghetti on the wall. There are constant restructures for organisations. There are, endless array of market pressures all the time. And what that actually does is create it disrupts focus and stability. And in a lot of ways too, it actually almost enforces more of a siloed mentality of, what's in it for me, a lot of, more individual contributor, people worried often about their jobs. And then naturally, then they're in these disconnected work styles. It means that we lose out on that collaboration and cohesion. And I think the third thing, therefore, what I really see a lot is that teams and individuals are not actually, what I say, playing at what they do best. And so we sort of get stuck doing a lot, feeling like we're just doing on the hamster wheel, but not actually coming up and being aware of, are we each actually leaning into the things that we do really well? And collectively as a team, do we each know what everyone does really well? And are we harnessing that? And I think that's probably a bit of a hint around why we're here today too, around team strengths is, in a nutshell, I think high performance and lack of team synergy is often driven by the fact that we're not aware of our strengths and we're certainly not playing to them collectively in our teams.
Yeah, and also just aware of those derailers, right? So often people like to use this word weaknesses. We don't believe in weaknesses, but we believe that people are wired to do some things well and some things not as well. But the not as well bits can sometimes derail us. And also the doing really well overdone can derail us. But if we don't know what that is, both for ourselves and as a collective, how can we possibly harness that or manage that or be aware of that? Because we haven't done the work to do that together. So thanks, Poppy. You're right. It is a hint on what we want to talk about today and some of the essence of what's available to teams to help them get back to where they want to. All right, so really quickly, very important, it is a time of great change and innovation, and the need to innovate and pivot and change to survive or to thrive is definitely the topic of the moment, isn't it? Yes, AI, but AI in terms of making things more efficient and helping us to unlock some of this kind of time to be more innovative and to do things in a more innovative way. So I'd like to hear, or Poppy and I would love to hear from you guys around this concept. Do you agree, or what does this mean to you? This concept of healthy conflict is where innovation happens. So who would like to give us their view on that? And please pop it into the chat if you don't want to call it out, but we'd love to hear your point of view on this concept of healthy conflict is where innovation happens. Who'd like to pitch in their idea?
And Ren, I'm happy to kick off some thoughts on this too from while everyone's having some thought, some thinking time and pondering it, I worked at Swiss Wellness, the vitamins business, for about 5 years. And I think we lived by this philosophy that healthy conflict was a must. We were a consumer goods business. Well, Swiss is a consumer goods business which only survives on innovation. So without healthy conflict, basically, we weren't able to innovate well. And I think often where I used to see that come to life, you know, in the day-to-day was there in meetings, like planning meetings, strategy meetings, you'd often see leaders and people disagreeing on all sorts of things. But one thing that always came to mind was we were always looking at whether we should expand into new markets. And you would have very different views. You know, some people clearly were more risk adverse and would, you know, come to all the reasons why, you know, we shouldn't expand into, you know, Europe, for example. And then others would always take more of that sort of opportunity lens. And I think what I experienced there was just, you know, it was really interesting seeing these, I would call them constructive clashes, where, you know, we would challenge one another from both, you know, a risk, but also an opportunity. And what it really led to in the Swiss business, that we almost took what I'd call a hybrid approach, where anytime we were going into a new market, we'd actually end up doing these small pilots. So we would build in safeguards and really consider all the risks, but then we'd push ahead in a contained pilot manner, so that we were sort of being bold, but in a cautious way. And I think that's often why we innovated so well. And that took conflict, like it took conflict and it took difference of opinion. And it took, I guess, the safety to know that we could do that with one another.
And I really want to just double down on what you just said, please, Poppy, around this concept of the safety to do that with one another. Do you think that innovation and that conflict would have been possible in a toxic team that didn't understand each other and didn't have that trust and rapport, which is kind of the foundation?
Yeah, a really good question, I think. And it's such, you know, we hear psychological safety and trust all the time. It's a bit of a buzzword. But fundamentally, if you don't have trust, those types of conversations would have never happened. Swiss was a very high-performing environment. It had a very collaborative culture. So I was fortunate that I wasn't in a toxic culture. But I do think it came down to trust. I think there was an appetite that, hey, it was okay if we made a mistake. It was okay if this innovation didn't work out. Funnily enough, we actually used to have awards that celebrated failure. Right. So not only were there awards given to, you know, all the best innovations, awards were given to the things that didn't work out because the business saw that as an opportunity. What did we learn? And I think as a result of that, we had enormous trust with one another. And that's probably why they, you know, continue to be successful and innovative.
Nice. Any other thoughts? Thank you, Poppy. Any other thoughts from anyone?
I guess what you were just saying, Pops, is really kind of celebrating and nurturing bravery, really, isn't it? And kind of being willing to give things a try. And I suppose, speaking, Ren, to that kind of healthy conflict, it's really that friction point where change happens, really. When you're talking about any kind of form of change, it can always feel uncomfortable. More so for some than others, depending on risk appetite and our own kind of leanings. But change is never easy, or innovation is never easy, because it's, you know, rewiring the way we do things, just a whole lot of unlearning and a whole lot of learning. So I guess it will never feel, if you're feeling uncomfortable, it's probably the way it should be, you know, through those kind of moments.
Yeah. And I'd like to use a little bit slightly different language for what you said, Bea, but it's such an important point. Is, first of all, you use the word celebrating bravery. Bravery actually is one of the 24 character strengths that we help people uncover. And most organizations have bravery at the bottom. So most people in organizations that we work with, bravery is definitely not in their top 5 strengths, which means the natural inclination is to not be brave. Which, in other words that both you and Poppy definitely used, was risk aversion. So I'm afraid to take a risk because I've got that lower bravery. I don't want to make mistakes. I don't like failing. Most people don't like failing. So the question for us is, when we are going into this conflict and building trust and rapport with one another, the first step is, who are the brave people amongst us? who can potentially help us to make some of those braver decisions, and who amongst us has bravery at the bottom so that they're aware that when they get in the way of innovation or push back on something or say that's not going to work, where is that mindset coming from? It's likely not because I want to be disruptive, but because as a team, they know that Renata has low bravery. When she's pushing back on something, I immediately know that it's because she has low bravery, not because she's trying to be a pain and get in the way of change. And so immediately that knowledge of each other starts to build those decisions that we make on how we're going to show up as the result of that friction that happens. And it's just so important, because in the innovative space, we are, to Poppy's point, particularly when we've got that high-performing team culture, we're going to rub up against one another, and we should, because in that conflict is where great ideas happen. It's what you do beyond that, how you show up, how you navigate those conversations, and how those ideas bubble up to go on to something amazing in terms of, as Poppy said, those safe experiments, those, chunking up and let's see what we can go and try and we'll learn from it. What's failure anyway? It's just our attempt at doing something and it may not have gone the way we wanted it to, but hey, what did we learn? And let's celebrate that. So again, this is a must. We have so many case studies, Kodak being the first one that comes to mind of, if you fail to innovate, then you are necessarily setting yourself up, for either falling behind the pack or going out of business. We need to innovate. We need to have that healthy conflict, but what can we do to actually get there?
That's great. Does anyone else have any examples or, I guess, insights or thoughts? Again, nothing right or wrong around where they've seen, I guess, healthy conflict enable innovation well, or potentially too where, there's still work in progress, or things that you've noticed where healthy conflict hasn't been, apparent, and how has that potentially impacted innovation or good outcomes? Oh, don't be scared. Somebody.
I'll jump in for you. Yeah, no, I do customer operations, so there's always conflicting priorities against teams within my divisions and things like that. And I think one of the challenges I had, not here where I am at the moment, but a previous role was, going back to, the 5 dysfunctions of a team, I suppose, is identifying the number one team. And that was us as a leadership group. We were our number one team, and we needed to work well as a number one team so that our teams could work cohesively as well. And I think the challenge we had there was, we hadn't developed to that point a conflict norm, and people weren't necessarily challenging respectfully or in a way that other people could take on that challenge. And so we did things like disc profiling and understanding our personality types, and putting together a conflict norm so that if we wanted to challenge something, we had set rules around how to do it respectfully, but also that took into account everyone's personality type. I'm quite dominant, and so I can make decisions on the go and get information quickly and move forward. And I'm quite analytical and not emotional in my decisions. Whereas, I had S's and C's in my team who like to get things in advance and consider things before making a decision on things. And so we had to put things in place because it was inhibiting us moving forward, because everyone wasn't agreeing, and they were just, even when we made decisions, they weren't on board with it. They were just like, oh, well, I'm, forced to go down this path, so I'll suck it up. But their team could tell they were sucking it up and they weren't sort of behind it. And so by changing the way we did things, it really helped us to everyone feel that even though the decision might not have been one that they would have made or wanted, that their thoughts were heard and considered, and that they understood why we're going the different way and were on board with the journey, as opposed to having their back up about it.
Yeah,
I love that. I love that, Kim. The final comment that you made, even about the why. I mean, half the reason there is unhealthy conflict is people never understand the why. Why are we doing this? Why is it important? Why is the priority changed? Like, we just totally miss that. And I think that's really important. I think the thing I liked most about what you said then is just basically formalizing, if you weigh the behaviors in this previous organization that you all agreed that you'd lean into and the behaviors that you'd lean out of. And I think a lot of the time that's not rocket science. It sounds really easy, right? But we actually don't talk objectively about what is it that we do as a team to show up well. I call that the above the line behaviors. And what's the stuff that we're going to leave at the door that we don't lean into and we don't show up to? And what does that sound like and look like? And I think when there's a commitment to knowing what those behaviors are, it's a lot easier, more tangible for people to say, oh, like, I get it. This is actually how I can comfortably show up and work with one another and know that, you know, I'll be trusted and people will have my back. And I equally know what's not expected and not respected, which when you're new to an organization or new to a team or earlier in your career, like, they're the basics, but they're really important.
And for me, Kim, a couple of things that sort of stood out. First of all, is the self-awareness of the team. Thank you for mentioning 5 dysfunctions of team. That's a core component of our team module, which is there are 5, you know, key areas, and you covered a few of them, which is that passive, I'm not going to say anything, but I don't agree. You know, Patrick Lencioni will call that the lack of commitment. If you haven't come out of healthy conflict and all got on the same page and written that social contract to say, this is what we're doing, this is the problem statement we're fixing, and this is what we're going to do together, you actually are lacking that commitment, which means you're not going to get to results. Because often we jump to results and we start working, but we miss those other steps, and the results are always subpar. Then, you know, people don't feel great at the end of it. They feel like they've under-delivered, or they haven't quite put themselves in it, or they don't have that team synergy along the way. So you've brought in quite a few concepts. Thank you so much. We may move on. I think it's, you know, I want to get through it all, but basically diversity, and we hear a lot about, you know, whatever your thought on DE&I is, and this is very topical at the moment, fundamental to diversity and inclusion is that everybody should have a chance to, as you pointed out, Kim, have their idea being heard, you know, put their ideas out there, put it out passionately, go into that healthy conflict, because we know that high-performing teams are all cognitively, characteristically, and demographically diverse. It's well researched that high-performing teams know how to harness diversity, know how to get the best out of individuals, and don't have groupthink, because groupthink often does not lead to innovation. I mean, it's a comfortable space and we finish each other's sentences. And often groupthink is that passive, I'm not going to say anything, I'm just going to nod and agree because I don't want to be, first of all, I want to belong to the pack. That's a natural human wiring thing. I don't want to speak up because I don't want people to not like me, and I want to feel like I belong. But certainly that high performance and that innovation has to come when there's diversity and inclusion. You know, we know that cognitive diversity is about 20% higher innovation in those teams. We know that there's less risk in the decisions that are taken, or at least risk is managed well, because we come at the risk from multiple perspectives and multiple experience set. But definitely why we have emotional intelligence, or EQ, as the hero of everything we do at Maxme, is that it is fundamental to getting the best out of people, both through that self-leadership or world of me, and then, you know, when I'm working with others in that world of we as well. But, you know, in order to get to that team high performance, we definitely have to show up as the best version of ourselves. Like, the only person you can control fundamentally is yourself. You can get to influence others or plead with others to do things a certain way, try and persuade them, but you can only really control and show up the best way, you know, best version of yourself. And if everybody does that with the right mindset when they move into the world of we definitely have a pretty good culture and a pretty good way of innovating and doing great work together. In high-performing teams, and this is, you know, based on the global research, the reason why it's so powerful, why that is the aspiration, right? The light on the hill is because people get a sense of that being part of something that's bigger than myself, which always feels quite motivating. Now, sometimes it can be daunting as well. Oh, I'm working with all these amazing people and, you know, imposter syndrome, they're so much better than me, et cetera, et cetera. But fundamentally, in that high-performing team that's got that great synergy, you feel like you're so abundant, so much more than you can do on your own. which then helps you to potentially overcome obstacles when things get hard. And we'll get to a slide in a minute on this concept, but I know that it's more, I don't have to do all the work. I've got this group around me. We have each other's backs. My opinion is valued. I'm heard. And we will get to great results because we have this high-performing norm that, you know, leads to results. Poppy, do you want to add anything at this stage?
Yeah. I mean, I agree very much too, just around a great team, you feel part of something bigger than yourself. And I think that's often the way, like if you were to describe what, you know, a high-performing team looks like, people will genuinely say, like, I feel like I have purpose and contribution to something bigger than myself. And that usually is true because they've got really clear clarity on what their responsibilities and ownership is within that team. And they can obviously then contribute and feel like they've got that purpose. I think one of the biggest on this, it's almost the antidote to it, is what is a disruptor to a high-performing team when it comes to working together. And I would say the number one thing is lack of recognition. Lack of recognition is just so powerful, recognizing people and not being in that hustle where we lack recognition. That's such our opportunity for high-performing teams and the teams that feel really strong synergy. It also, lack of recognition is currently causing the most amount of psychological stress in any workplace. And so if we think about, you know, back to healthy conflict, if we think back to how do we create more innovation, how do we get everyone doing what they're really good at, it actually does come down to, you know, recognition. And it is what people crave. And it is the number one thing that is not happening in our workplaces. And it doesn't need to be costly, right? It's not always about big bonuses and promotions and things. It's actually about finding ways to recognize people's contributions. And that's a teamwork fundamental in my eyes that leads to, you know, a high-performing team.
And again, this is, and you know, again, not to want to keep going back to what Kim was saying, but I think she said one of her preferences is to be pretty factual and just get on with things. Now, Kim, it'd be interesting to see your strengths profile around this, but that might be that you have what's called gratitude. Not that you're not grateful, but gratitude might be a little bit lower in your strength set, which means it's not that you're not grateful for people around you, it's just that you don't feel like you need to say something, and you may not realize that people around you need that from you. Just even a, hey, Ren, that was amazing. I'm so grateful that you did that, right? Now, what we would argue is that once you have that transparency around the team, which is what are our collective strengths and what are collective derailers or who's got what, we can then start to have different awareness and different, you know, self-management or team management norms. And again, back, you use the DISC language, we use the POS psych strength language. What can we do? What kind of new habits can we create? Because back to your point, Poppy, this lack of recognition is normally, you know, back to Maslow, it's kind of right at the bottom of the Maslow's hierarchy. Like if you're not feeling, you know, if you're not feeling it and if you've got the vibe of the stuff that's going on at the bottom, you can't get to self-actualization and that high performance because you get stuck. You don't want to be there. You don't feel like you belong. You don't feel valued, etc. So you're right. Some of these things that present are so avoidable, and actually through pretty basic things that you can choose to do along the way. So we should probably move to those, huh? Let's move forward. Okay, great. So, you know, something quite random that I normally introduce at this stage is the concept of geese and how geese fly. And we can learn a lot from geese, actually, around team dynamics and team zen. Now, first thing is that geese fly in a V formation for a reason, because there's actually an aerodynamic effect to flying in that way. When they flap their wings, they actually help. They give an aerodynamic lift to the geese that are behind them. So they intuitively know that actually the work that they're doing is actually contributing and helping the work of others. We know that the way they fly, or when they fly in a V formation, they actually go further than if they were flying that same distance alone. And so really important, they have this concept of interdependent success, that they know that on their own, they're going to have to work harder, much harder, to get the same distance. And actually, if they can gel, they're going to be more efficient together. But they have to be flying well, right? Obviously, in that right formation. We also know that geese naturally, share the workload. So when the front goose gets tired, it rotates to the back and another goose takes over. And no negotiation, no, kind of, oh, no, you do it. It's just that they naturally know that once you get to a point of exhaustion or you can't do it anymore, go to the back, someone else is going to take over. It's okay. We're all in it together. And then finally, my favorite one, sometimes I break out into the honking noise, but geese honk for one another. They actually honk because they're natural cheerleaders. They are cheering each other on to do the best work that they can do individually. Come on, guys, let's go, let's go, let's go. You've got this, let's do it. And they naturally have each other's backs. We can learn a lot from geese in terms of the ideas behind high-performing teams and how do we go further together. Now, I think there's some stuff in the chat, Poppy.
Yeah, Ren, Kim's just said, I love this analogy that you use, the honk. I know, Kim, so many people have said that in this work that Ren produces. I think the thing about the honk, what I've said is that, and what I take from this is that how we show up, right, how we honk, if you like, really does influence how others show up, and having that self-awareness and being aware that if we show up in a way, chances are that rubs off and influences others, and also empowers us, I guess, to then be able to show up and, in the geese analogy, take our turn at the front to be able to positively influence others well.
And know what we're good at and step in that way. And, I would use here, zest is the strength of energy. I've got zest in my top 5. I'm a natural cheerleader, but we work with a lot of organizations that have high profile of low zest, low energy people. So they're not going to be the natural cheerleaders. But the work that we do with organizations, particularly in this space of emotional intelligence and self-awareness, is it's not an excuse to say I'm a low energy person. Sometimes, to Poppy, to your point, you've got to go to the front and you've got to be the energy giver. So what does it look like for you to show up in that way? If you know that's a natural derailer for you and you are a lower energy person, what can you do to bring the energy, to bring the gratitude, to bring whatever to the occasion? Because right now it's your turn to lead the group through whatever's going on. So again, it's that awareness that who am I? And how are we as a group? If we're a lower energy group, what habits can we put in place that actually people, when they do get to need to step up to the plate, it can't just always be Ren that shows up with the high energy. That's not fair. Who else can share the load with her around this kind of cheerleading or energy giving type of scenario? Okay, amazing. We might skip over this one because we are, trottling through time, but just really importantly, in terms of the teamwork, and we wanted to really just take you through 4 things that often get in the way. First of all, it's that a lack of alignment on direction. When we don't have that alignment on direction and people are rowing in the same direction, when you have rowers that row at different paces in different times, the boat often goes around and around in circles or capsizes. So really importantly, a high-performing team has that alignment on direction, has that shared vision, that commitment to one another. They've set common goals. Everyone knows what their roles are, what their strengths are, and we row in the same direction at the same pace, and we're aligned. The second thing that gets in the way is the lack of these high quality interactions, otherwise known as effective communication, right? So where we communicate clearly, we trust one another that when I speak up, no one's going to cut me down or make me feel bad about what I've said. Actually, there's the trust and rapport, we're aligned, and people have psychological safety to turn up as themselves and pitch in their ideas. I think Kim mentioned it might not be the idea that gets up on the day, but at least I've been heard. At least I've pitched in. At least I feel like I can now move to commitment. Whatever we've decided to do, we've decided as a group, we've all been heard. The third thing is this lack of a strong sense of renewal. When a group doesn't know how to recover from setbacks, how to get back when things haven't gone well, and guess what? If we're innovating, if we're pushing ourselves out of the comfort zone, which we should be, things are not going to go our way sometimes. But what do we do as a team? Do we start to rip each other to shreds? Do we start to do the salute? No, it's not my fault, it's everybody else's fault. Or do we just lack interest and just move away and go, oh, well, whatever? We have to have that strong sense of renewal as a team. And finally, that interdependence. We talked about this in the previous slide. high-performing teams have a strong, or geese in particular, have this strong sense of interdependent success. We cannot do it as well without one another. But we don't, it's not just conceptual, we have to feel it, and deeply be committed to it as well. Anything from you on this, Poppy?
Yeah, that I think I probably that renewal piece, that language around that renewal, I often say it's just about having the awareness to be and the willingness to be adaptive. And I think we touched on at the start, like the common denominator in any workplace is uncertainty and change. And so great teams are really good at just accepting that they will have to adapt and having that adaptability mindset. And I think that's how that shows up, is that, hey, we're willing to give feedback, we're willing to ask feedback, we're willing, or ask for feedback, we're willing not to blame and shame, Ren, as you know, you were insinuating before, but more like that willingness of what did we learn and what will we do differently. And I think that, yeah, that ability to be adaptive is really important. I was going to ask, actually, just with these 4 things, I guess, to anyone in the group, is there, in anyone's experiences now or through their careers, has there been, you know, anything in particular that you found has got in the way of, you know, a great, you know, great team results?
Hi, Poppy. Janet here. How are you? Hi, Ren.
Hi.
Hey, for me, definitely alignment of direction. I think that's one of the biggest issues that face a lot of teams. They have no idea what they're aiming for. It's just they get bogged down in the day-to-day. They've got no concept of what maybe management is aiming for. So they're not on that same plane as everyone else, because the direction, the vision, the commitment, the expectations, all of that hasn't been shared adequately. I certainly have noticed that in the automotive industry, which is my area of strength. So, yeah, that lack of direction, vision, huge. Yeah.
And I think, you know, back to the not aligned with leadership, and I agree with you. Often we say, oh, we haven't heard from the top, but actually misalignment with one another. As someone who's led a lot of business transformation, one of the biggest challenges and why we failed to realise the benefits at the end is we never properly got on the same page and had that great debate about what problem we're trying to solve together.
Correct.
So we're not aligned on the actual problem statement and what we're doing together. And so we end up going in different directions. We're doing really, like Poppy said at the start, busy work. We're busy doing stuff, but actually collectively we're not moving towards the quantum of this solution or change that we want to drive and be a part of. Because of that misalignment, we end up getting to the end going, oh God, well, that's not going to solve this problem, but too late now, let's keep moving. So there's that really important work that needs to happen at the start, which often we miss, to your point. Yeah.
And I'd only add to that, I think, Janet's such a good point just around, that's the setup, as you and Ren would describe. It's the setup. Like, if there isn't that shared vision and agreement and alignment around what the problem is we're trying to solve, you will get everyone on a hamster wheel going in all different directions. I think that the last thing I see is sometimes people say, oh yeah, we know what's expected of us. But then if you say to each of those people, what does success look like? Everyone will say, actually, I don't know, or you'll get different answers. And I think that's often the downfall, is when you're setting expectations, ensure that every single person is aligned on what the success end goal, end result looks like, because that then gives them the means to be able to take the steps towards everyone getting towards that same success.
And in this age of AI, where people are doubling down into their own little world and my chat GPT and my blah, blah, whatever, actually that misalignment is likely to happen more, not less, because we're not realigning our collective understanding of things. We're just going off on tangents versus what the computer says, so we're just going to do this and flick it over to one another. We're failing to find those moments of cohesion and coming back together. And often that's because the team hasn't got that team synergy, that high performance, those norms around working together. And it ends up being quite a big schism. All right, let's keep moving. So really importantly, and this is a key catch cry, when things get hard, strong teams don't give up. They get behind each other. Weak teams start blaming each other. And, often this cohesion, this synergy that we said a lot of our clients are saying is lacking, it doesn't just happen. Oh, like my team's not working well together. Well, okay, there's most likely going to be reasons why. You've got to do the work, though. There's an absolute foundation to that high performance, which is definitely interdependence and building that trust and rapport. We've all seen this. We've all heard of these phases: forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning. Maybe we haven't, but this is the 5 stages of team. It's a, you know, it's a mental model, a framework that's used globally. And it does align to the 5 dysfunctions of team, because most of the time we jump straight into storming or norming or even trying to perform, right, together. Oh, let's just go to results. Let's just start working. We haven't done the work to do the team forming. We haven't worked out who's around the virtual table, because often it's virtual. Who are we? What do we do well? What do we not do well? What's the social contract? How are we going to show up with one another? And then once we've done that work, then we can move into that healthy conflict, the debate, the storming, and then the norming and performing and results. So it's such a critical stage that we often jump over and we don't do it properly. And then we wonder why things don't go well in the end. So we skip that critical team forming strength and we miss the opportunity to understand each other through this lens of strengths. Look, I just wanted to say that in the work that we do, there are many, many frameworks out there. There are several strengths frameworks. We chose VIA because, one, it's deeply aligned to the work of Martin Seligman, who is, you know, you would argue that the sort of the father of the positive psychology movement. And we just like the simplicity of the language. Some of the other strengths frameworks use language that's not easily recognizable or easy to remember. And there's only 24 character strengths. Other frameworks have far more. So that's why we've chosen VIA. It's plumbed into our experience. It's at the start of the experience. And here's some of the language that you will discover around yourself and your teams. And the 6 kind of main kind of words: wisdom, courage, humanity, they're called virtue families. So the 24 character strengths are, you know, further broken down into these sort of 6 virtue families with obviously commonality. Now, really importantly, and, you know, I couldn't sort of give it justice, you know, around this team strengths concept without saying, you know, we've developed a tool that allows you to quite quickly come up with, you know, core insights around who you've got on the table. And I am going to just quickly show you the tool just because it's really cool and we're very proud of it. But basically, once your team has done the team strengths, so you've done that recognition, you know, and, you know, you've got on the on the right-hand side there, the 24 character strengths. You know each individually what your 1 to 24 is, your top 5, your middle, and your bottom 5. And then you can start to look at this collectively. So you can start to bring all of the names in your team, in your organization, because you can slice and dice it many different ways, depending on how you want to manage it as the leader of that group. And it starts to give you insights around, for example, for this group, their top 5 collectively is kindness. Kindness and honesty are their top 5 strengths as a group. So the way that they're going to show up to one another is they're going to be intuitively very kind with one another, considerate. High kindness generally leads to high empathy as well. And they're also going to be really honest with one another. They're going to say what needs to get said, and, you know, they're going to be able to share that feedback, right? Put their ideas out there. Now, interestingly, we also do it for the top 10 because, you know, it's really important to sort of broaden it out. We generally say to people, your top 10 won't change that often. Sometimes you get slight, you know, number 2 might drop to number 4 and number 5 might go to number 3, but your top 10 generally stays as your top 10. And so it's really important to get to know what those are for yourself and also for your team. And how do you do more of it? It's not just the what, it's also the so what and the now what. That's really critical to start to draw out those behaviors, and also the what are we going to do with one another and how are we going to be more aware of it. We also then highlight the bottom 5. These are the derailers, I guess, for the team. So as you can see straight away, temperance is the strength of staying on track, you know, sort of, you know, that strength of inner strength in a team. You can see straight away this team has got low self-regulation, low prudence, you know, low forgiveness. So as a team, what might derail us when we come together? All right, well, we're going to take some risks, and maybe we're going to take some excessive risks. So who is going to check in to make sure that even though we've got low prudence, that we probably measure twice, cut once, but we're not naturally, going to do that as a team without putting the sort of habits or the agreements in our social contract on how we're going to stay the course. You'll also see here in this team, they're low zest, right? So 11 team members have got zest in their bottom 5. Again, lower energy teams. They're not going to turn up and, do that cheerleading for one another. What does that mean? How might that show up? And how are we going to get around it and make sure it doesn't derail us when we're doing that high-performing team work? Anything from you, Poppy, before I just jump into a little bit of a demo of the tool?
No, I think it's, I mean, it sounds like it's a great tool, Ren. I think what I love that Maxme does with using the VIA and these 24 character strengths is just it helps people and teams just understand first and foremost what these strengths also mean. I think sometimes the 24 strengths, the language initially can be like quite abstract, and I've always liked the way that Maxme actually really quite quickly helps people understand, oh, okay, what do each of these 24 terms actually mean in the first instance? And then obviously, so I'd love to see the tool now, Ren, because I think that's then the vehicle of the so what. So now that we understand what it means, how do we then act upon that well?
Thanks, Poppy. So what you're seeing here is the web version of our app, Hody. And so all I need to do is log in with my credentials. Can you guys see that? Just if you could confirm you're seeing the Hody screen. Yes, great.
Yep.
All right, and then you get the choices on the web version of the various tools and things. We're going to go into the Max in Us Team Manager tool. We're also about to go live with this version of the tool where individual contributors can use it to do a strengths profile on each other. So in other words, I might be working with Poppy and with Belinda. I'm not the team manager, but the three of us are about to launch work together. And I can go and generate a strengths profile for Poppy, Belinda, and I, so that we can, before getting started and doing work together, we can sit down and have a look at our collective profile and then work out how we're going to work well with one another in that team forming stage before we continue on. So I'll just go into the team manager tool. As you can see, there's some reports that already exist. I'm going to build a new team. So I'm going to say, okay, the team name, I want to call this profile for Poppy and Belinda. Okay, maybe if I could just spell, and then I go save. Oh, sorry, before I do that, I'm going to add in. So one of the other cool things is each time you do your strengths profile, you're going to get a unique code that's going to sit in your profile. And the dynamic nature of this means that when Poppy and Belinda and I work together, we're each going to have a unique code. We can put that in. And then as soon as Natalie comes into our team as well, we can generate a new report just in time, because Natalie will have her unique code and we can add her in and it'll generate a new team profile for us. So I'm going to save that. Okay, beautiful. So it tells you who the team members are. And then I can view our collective strengths profile. So there's the tool, real time, the click of a finger, and basically tells you who are all of the members in the team. And it gives you immediately the collective strengths profile. So we know, without naming names, because we also don't need to know that, but we can, because as you can see, it's giving you the individual strengths profile at the top. But we can collectively look at, all right, 3 of us have high fairness. 2 of us have high humour, high humility, and high honesty. So we can straight away work out what is the likely way that we are going to show up. We're all going to be pretty geared towards making sure that everyone's getting a fair go when we're working together, that it's a fair outcome for the people that we're working for and with. We're really wired to think about the fairness of the solution that we're coming up with. And if we're going to feel like there's nepotism or it's an unfair, sort of unbalanced approach for anyone, we're potentially going to be derailed by that. We're also going to be a humorous, right? A humorous team amongst us. We know how to laugh it off. We're not going to take it too seriously. So 2 of us are going to really help, for us as a group to continue to see the funny side of things, humility, etc. It also generates the bottom 5 for us as well. So as you can see immediately, 2 of us are low energy. 2 of us probably don't have that sort of strong want to be leaders. We're happy to be led as well. We've got we've got low hope. So when things get hard, two of us are going to really find it hard to see the happy side of things, or that good things are going to happen as a result. And two of us are kind of that lower love, which means we don't need to have the connection of others to do our best work. So again, what this shows us is that when people are showing up in a certain way as we do work together, maybe I'm going to be a bit of a negative Nelly because I've got lower hope, or I'm really not going to understand that, you know, someone is going to want my attention or my time because I've got low love. That's why I'm showing up that way. It's not because I don't care and I'm an asshole. It's actually because I'm not wired to have that as a top strength. Now, if I'm one of those people, I need to think about how I'm not going to let that derail me. And as a team, we really put this social contract in place to say, okay, you know, I know that when Audrey turns up lower energy because she just, you know, that's how she is, it's not because she doesn't care. You know, she's got better things to do. It's just that's how she's wired. So I'm going to try and encourage her because she's got that lower energy as her teammate, as an example. So as you can see, really quickly and very dynamically, as long as all four people have done their individual strengths profile on the Hody app, we have now built this tool where you can dynamically put in their codes and at the touch of, you know, click of a button, generate a collective team strengths tool, and it's very dynamic. So people leave the team, people come into the team, Poppy and I work together, we can generate one of these, and then we can be much more informed around this forming stage and around that awareness of one another so that we can go and do great work together. All right. Well,
what I love about that tool, I think, is, in simple terms, is it gives people the language to have a conversation around what you do well and what you do less well. And I think more than ever, that is so important when we're talking about high-performing teams, because we are needing more than ever trust, we're needing more than ever safety, we're needing more than ever connection and healthy conflict and cohesion. They're the things that are going to get teams humming. And I think, yeah, what I love about this is it gives people that simple language to begin to have a conversation around, hey, we do this well, but we also, you know, we don't do this so well. So what does that mean for us?
Fantastic. Thank you, Poppy. All right. Well, on that, I think that we were going to move to questions. I think. What is on your mind? Any questions from anyone? Any reflections? Is it making sense? Anyone feel like haven't covered something that is burning that they want to cover in this topic of team synergy and team performance, high-performing teams? Any thoughts?
If there's one thing you could both, I guess, leave with people to take away an action from here ongoing, what would it be in the scheme of really, I guess, harnessing team strengths and playing into that? What would be the most compelling kind of call to arms here?
Poppy, you want to go first?
I think for me,
go.
Yeah, no, I can go. I think for me, a lot of the time I'm asked when it comes to strengths. So, okay, so we know our strengths. How can we actually bring that into our day-to-day? Like, what are the actual practical ways? Why would it benefit our teams and our organization? And I think first and foremost, I say there are so many different ways, but yes, it gives the language to be able to talk about it. That builds trust and safety. That's really important. I think it also, again, it gives people, leaders especially, an opportunity to recognize people, like they know what each person does well. Great. Anchor your recognition to that. Another great way for strengths is, like, when you know your strengths and your team's strengths, then you can start helping people set goals that enables them to use their strengths to hit those goals. So that's great, tick. A lot of companies actually even recruit through knowing their strengths. So at Swiss, we did this. So based on our team's strengths profiles, we would identify where there were gaps in the team, and we would, not exclusively, but we would look to recruit to build up in areas that potentially the team was lower on. And I think even just from managing challenging conversations and burnout, like when you know what people do really well, you can then start saying, okay, if you're facing this challenge, how can you use your strengths to get, jump over the hurdle? Or if you are facing burnout, are there any potential strengths you might be leaning into too hard? I think there's so many different ways to use strengths. And obviously, finding out what your strengths are and your team's strengths, as Ren and Maxme have demonstrated here, is just the beginning to be able to do so much with it practically day to day.
Yeah, look, I would really echo that, B. I think a lot of us lament and go, oh, why it's so hard? But we just have a lack of action orientation off the back of that. I'm constantly in wonder about there is very effective, quite simple things that can be done, and we're in the busy, so we're like, oh, we'll do it tomorrow. But actually, you've got to sort of create that space, and then you move into this sort of less haste, more speed type of mindset. It really is about take some action, like do a strengths profile on yourself and your teams, have a conversation about it, start to build in small habits. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be time consuming. We have to make the space for it. We've got to slow down to speed up, because I'm honestly saying, and it's really sad to see that the freight train is headed towards the wall for a lot of organisations. And it is so sad to hear from individual contributors who are constantly saying how disconnected they feel, they don't want to be at work, they're doing the bare minimum, they're quiet quitting, they're all of the terminology that came out of COVID. Just because we've stopped talking about it doesn't mean it's gone away. And now we overlay this whole madness around AI and what does it mean for my job, and should I be doing this or shouldn't I be doing that? There's just so much volatility in the system at the moment. But we need to move back to, okay, all of that is the norm, all of that's not going away, but what can we do to bring our teams back to useful things around aligning on direction, interdependence, knowing how to recover from setbacks, getting on the same page, helping each other out, honking together, like whatever that looks like. And the global research is that strengths is the pathway. There really isn't a reason why any organisation shouldn't have this clarity and this common language within their organisations and use it and harness it for greatness, because it's so effective, so effective. Yeah. All right. Well, look, that brings us to a close, a little bit over, but thank you so much for those that turned up today, and hopefully you've enjoyed the conversation and got something out of it. We really look forward to staying in touch, and, for you to continue watching the work that we collectively do. We always love people who follow us and give us, lots of that pats on the back as we are, forging forward to try and create organisations that have these high-performing teams and people that do want to show up and be the best version of themselves. So thank you again, and good luck. Good luck with the rest of your week and the rest of the quarter as we march forward to the end of the financial year. Who can believe it? May already. Anyway, thank you so much. Thank you. All right. See you later.
Thanks, ladies. Great session.
Thank you. Bye.